Before we hop into things, I would really appreciate if you could go down into either the description or the comment section, and I have a Google form link there that is going to be about rotation and the biggest losses. I'm going to use that for an upcoming video, and I'd really appreciate the help. So if you could fill that out, that'd be really cool. But let's get hop into the video. Hey everyone, it's SunTypes, and today I think we need to talk about Pokemon tools because recently, specifically this past year, Pokemon completely revolutionized them, turning them from something that was kind of an afterthought in the Pokemon TCG to something that's a really important aspect. And they did that in just 1 year, which is really cool. Of course, this is due to a rule change, among other things, and a change in design philosophy a little bit. First of all, let's start off with what tools used to be like. And these are tools that are going to be rotating coming up. So battle styles. We got a few different types of cards. Well, I guess if not that many. We had scrolls, and I'll introduce the scrolls. There were single strike scrolls and rapid strike scrolls, and these were tool cards that say if it can only be or it can be attached to any type of Pokemon, but it can only really be used if it's attached to a single strike or a rapid strike Pokemon. And it says it gives it an attack that you can use, and when you attach it to what stays attached, as tools do. But then you need like the energy to use the attack, and in this case, it's for one fighting. Fierce Anger does 10 and 10 more for each damage counter on this Pokemon. And the Rapid Strike one was spread. We got some other ones. Keep in mind that the types for Rapid Strike and Single Strike are fighting. The ones the ones fighting in darkness, and the one is fighting water. All the scrolls are mostly fighting, but not all fighting, and they did not utilize the darkness or water, which would have been nice. So we got scrolls like this one, which are fire, lightning, fire, uh, metal, and so those are very awkward to use in like the Rapid Strike or Single Strike decks. At the end of the day, they don't need to be talked about too much because they're all pretty bad. You could play some of them sometimes, but for the most part, they were very awkward to use. And they weren't very powerful, and of course, being only playable in certain types of decks and very specific decks oftentimes means that they were not that good. So we had those. Then we had ways to disrupt tools. Of course, there were other tools before this. There were cards like Air Balloon, which is kind of like Floatstone, and that was a very good tool. But that rotated a little while ago, and we're seeing cards kind of like that coming back that reduce retreat costs, but nothing quite like Floatstone. But anyway, we also saw Tool Jammer. There's also Tool Scrapper that, again, rotated, is not in standard right now, but Tool Jammer is, and this is a tool that stops tools. So unsurprisingly, when you print cards like this, tools are not going to be as good. So yeah, we had tool scrapper as well, which is an item that removes tools. And keep in mind, at this time, tools were classified as items. Now we'll get to why that is not the case right now and the change. But they were items, and then a subclass of items was tools, so they weren't really thought of as a big thing. We only saw, for example, 3 in this one set. And then, as I said, they kept making more scrolls. In the next set, or I guess in 2 sets, I also introduced Stadium Shopping Center. Shopping Center is pretty interesting, allowing you to return a tool from in play into your hand. This is potentially extremely useful, but only if you're playing like lots of different tools. Theoretically, this could be used with the scrolls, and we saw the last scrolls in that set as well. But this card wasn't too good. It was their attempt at making a stadium that worked with tools, but really wasn't all that. Because usually you'd attach the tool as a Pokemon you'd want it to, right? You could do some interesting things, but they were very specific. Next up, we got the gloves. I guess we have gloves for pretty much every type. And for example, weeding gloves, the attacks of this Pokemon the Pokemon this card is attached to do 30 more to your opponent's active grass Pokemon. This is obviously a decent amount extra damage. 30 is pretty common. We've seen this a bunch of times. We saw but then we do see Choice Belt, and Choice Belt is weird. I might make a whole video on it. But this came out in Brilliant Stars, and there's 30 more to your opponent's active Pokemon V, which is a pretty big deal, and at the time was a really good card. Very much better than the gloves. The gloves are pretty terrible, but there are a lot of them, and so they were part of why tools are kind of made fun of because we had all these gloves which were bad. We got Gland Chest Plate, Rugged Helmet, and Pot Helmet, Farewell Bell, Full Face Guard, all these tools that had effects when you're hit into, but like you don't really want to be getting hit into. You're probably just going to get knocked out. Some of these end up seeing some amount of play. I think the best of which was was Pot Helmet, which is in control-based decks, or Full Face Guard, which is also sometimes in control-based decks, but more so in tanky decks, is it reduced damage. And tools like that were moderately useful, but they reduced like 20 or 30 damage, and weren't the most consistent cards or usable in the most Pokemon. So, and again, we've seen cards like that again with Rock Chestplate, Rigid Band, Defiance Vest. But the ones that are seeing the most play are, well, Defiance Vest and Rigid Band are allowing you to reduce um, more. Rigid Band is only, I think, 30, but pretty easy to use and usable on a wide variety of Pokemon. Defiance Vest is usable on any Pokemon and is reduced 40 only if you're down on prizes, but very useful. But so those tools aren't generally the best. You need tools that do more interesting effects and that are more powerful. So in addition to the gloves, we also got the badges. These are on the Evolution VMAXs, and it doesn't necessarily matter too much what they do. They're actually all pretty good. Um, in fact, they're all very good, but the Evolution VMAXs were not amazing. I mean, they're pretty decent, but they often require a bunch of pieces and then adding a badge on top of that. I mean, it's fine, but again, specific tools are not good. They can be good, but they're very reliant on whatever they're attached to, like the what they have to be attached to. So in this case, um, Moon and Sun badge has to be attached to a Pokemon V that has Espeon or Umbreon in its name, and then it has an effect, and it stops effects of supporters done to that Pokemon, which are potentially useful, but again, not like the most useful thing. That's probably the least useful. The others are all better, but again, they were only good in those specific decks. So, kind of like the scrolls, they're even less universal in the scrolls. They weren't the best. Next up, we got ourselves some more gloves, right? We got gloves for pretty much every type. We got a few interesting tools here. Panic Mask. This ended up synergizing with the Serena EX deck. It was actually very good with that, being given complete immunity to Pokemon with 40 from Pokemon that had 40 HP less, 40 HP or less remaining. Sorry, I'm kind of tired. But that is potentially powerful if you're able to do lots of damage to your opponent and put them to low HP, which we see with Serena EX. So this was noticeably before Serena EX, but when tools became good, Serena EX came out. Not that those like not that Serena EX is the reason that tools became good, but it kind of coincided. We saw like a wind up arm, which is bad. Super effective glasses, which sees some play right now, but it's quite frankly not that good of a card. It's very situational. It has slipped into relevance right now, but not that good. Um, no, potentially could be good again with EXs now that Terra EXs that like change type that could be good, but probably not. Blender Policy, this card is pretty trash. Um, it's a funny card, but it's not very good. That was like a whole year and a bit's worth of tools, which yeah. We also got Leafy Camo Poncho and Box of Disaster, which are okay. Leafy Camo Poncho seeing some play in Arceus. Box of Disaster mostly seeing play in Mew. Again, could be in Arceus. There are different combos there, but they're decent, slightly more universal tools, but not amazing tools. More like defensive and not very powerful tools. But then in Silver Tempest, everything changed. First of all, I want to highlight Lost Vacuum. Lost Vacuum is tool disruption, and it has been played pretty commonly, but with the rotation of Path to the Peak, this will be played less because this stops removes a stadium or a tool. But the biggest thing to remove is Path to the Peak, in which you don't have to remove that. This won't be as good, so tool disruption will be lowered. And also, like, it only removes one. So if you need a tool to be in play, you can have multiple copies in Lost Vacuum. Now your opponent needs to play multiple Lost Vacuums, and they probably don't. But anyway, so we saw Lost Vacuum. What that isn't like Tool Jammer kind of like really annoys tools, and one Tool Jammer can like it can just be a massive problem to a tool-based deck. One Lost Vacuum will not kill a tool-based deck. Tool Scrapper would be more likely, but as I said, that rotated a little while ago. Um, yeah, then Silver Tempest, then we saw the Seal Stones. Well, we saw some of the Seal Stones. We saw two of them. The big one, of course, is Forest Seal Stone. Forest Seal Stone is a V-Star power tool, so it's kind of like the scrolls giving you some extra effect. In this case, it's an ability that's like super broken. So Force Seal Stun was the first big tool. This tool, in my opinion, is very good. I think that's not something that people really dispute. Also, sorry if there's any noise. There's construction outside. But anyway, this tool is very good. That being said, you can only really use one of this per game because its V-Star powers can only be used once per game. It lets you search check for any cards. So now you have this very active ability. Literally, it's an ability that you do, and you activate it, and it's so powerful. We also saw Sky Sealstone and Earth and Sealstone. Sky Sealstone was okay. Unfortunately, lost relevance very quickly after it came out. And then Earth and Sealstone is not that good, but Force Sealstone is so good. It's one of the best cards in the game, arguably. I mean, that's kind of a weird term to throw around, but I don't feel bad saying that. And it sees playing all sorts of decks, um, including ones that aren't focused on Pokemon V, which is what it has to work with. And while that is semi-specific, pretty much any deck can play Pokemon V. You can play cards like Lumineon V, Rotom V, Sylveon V, that'll rotate, but and then Pidgeot V, and those are all pretty universal. So you have this insanely good tool that you can pretty much slot into any deck that isn't naturally using a V-Star power. So you won't really see this in Giratina V-Star decks, Arceus V-Star decks, Palkia V-Star decks. Although you could see it in Giratina deck. Like you could play it in those decks, and this card's really good. So this was the first big tipping point. Now I imagine some people would say this is like the reason tools became good, but in my opinion, it's not. From this set, after the end of the Sword and Shield era, the beginning of the Scarlet and Violet era, we saw a big change, and that was that tools were no longer item cards. So you see Force Seal Stone sets an item now. It's been errata or, for lack of a better term, retconned. So it is not an item card anymore, which changed a lot of interactions for tool cards in particular. So, and for example, a card like Irida or Pokestop that grabbed item cards can now no longer grab tool cards, which is a pretty big downgrade, which makes you think, like, why are they better now? But that meant that now that they're their own type of card, for example, with Vitality Band, which is not very good, but is played some, this type of card, like, would be worse, but it actually is better because the Pokemon themselves, they decided to commit more to the tool idea. And then we got cards like Arvin and Town Store, which specifically searched out tools. Arvin's Town Store is a stadium that's just searched out a tool every turn. This is kind of considered somewhat similar to Shopping Center. I've honestly seen these two cards been confused. I've heard Town Center so many times. But Town Store is a better, saying it's a better shopping center is kind of a weird thing to say. They're not exactly comparable, but Town Store is so good in tool-based decks versus Shopping Center is kind of mid. But then Town Store, it's so good. Arvin, really good as well. It was naturally good with Force Seal Stone, but now we've got some better tools, which I'll talk about. Of course, we have cards like Bravely Charm. I mentioned Choice Belt. Defiance Band, EXP Share. Some of those have been around, but they're good. And then we saw the big tool cards. First of all, we have the Ancient and Future Booster Energy Capsules. These are both arguably very good tools that have not reached their full potential at all yet, but they are good with specifically Ancient and Future Pokemon. They're very much like the Scrolls. They're a little better, I'd say, because they synergize better with Ancient and Future Pokemon, and they're generally, I guess, a little better. But there's nothing too crazy to say about them, especially now because we're going to see a lot coming up soon post rotation, but that's not happening just yet. A lot more Ancient and Future Pokemon and Tempo Forces. But we saw Luxurious Cape. Luxurious Cape, I mean, it's a tool that gives you 100 more HP. And next, we're also going to see A-Spec tools. There's one that gives you 100 extra HP, which are nice. Not make or break, but still nice. But then we see the technical machines. Technical Machine Blindside, Technical Machine Devolution, Technical Machine Evolution, and Technical Machine Turbo Energize. I'll just highlight Turbo Energize here. I think it's very good. Doesn't see too much play because it doesn't have a lot of good synergy, but it's a very good card. And it's a tool. One weird thing is that you lose the tool after you play it. You essentially play it like an item. You get to keep it on the Pokemon for that turn, but then it's discarded after that turn, which is a bit of a weird dynamic, but is what happens. And then you see it, you do TM Turbo Energize, and then from there you get to copy the attack, and these attacks are all colorless on the Technical Machine. There's also Technical Machine Crisis Punch, which is good. Came out a little bit later as well. But these cards are so good, and they have finally revolutionized tools to make them something really good. Now you have 4 Seal Stone plus the technical machines, and every deck has a series of tools that they're able to make into a very powerful deck. Notably, Technical Machine Evolution is very powerful for setup. We see it in a lot of Charizard decks, and I think it's very good in Gardevoir. You can play it in some decks, and I'll see more play going forwards as well. Technical Machine Devolution has seen the most play. This is incredibly disruptive and good. It's not setup based, but is an attack that any single deck in the game can use. This card is incredibly powerful and something really cool. But overall, that's what caused tools to become great, right? We got Townstone and Arvin, and honestly, those helped a lot. And we got Pokemon finally leaning into tool support, which is really cool. As opposed to saying, oh, items are fine, so tools are items, and they're fine. But no, now tools are super important in the Pokemon TCG, which is really fun. And I'm looking forward to seeing what TMs are going to print in the future, what e-spec tools are going to print in the future. But I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, consider hitting that subscribe button. Also, down below, I am doing a form or a survey type thing about rotation. If you could answer that, that'd be super helpful. I'm going to use it for a few videos coming up. But I hope you enjoyed, and as always, I'm excited to see you in the next video.